Yes, Radar Radio, Topic Sound, myself, Chuckie Online, Benny Scars is in the house. Can we get a round of applause for our guest, Darcus Beese, please? What's going on?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
What an intro. House. I can't believe it.
I can't believe it,
Oh,
bro.
shut up, man.
You know,
Come
this is the
on
first
now.
time you two know each other. We have met briefly through a couple of, so we've never had a proper conversation. So firstly, I just want to say thank you for coming by and
Mate,
being a part of.
Mate, I'm humbled to get the invite. Seriously, I'm more happy to be here than you're happy to have me here. Trust me.
I don't know about that, but so you know what? I want to just right from the beginning. I want to go like literally right from the beginning.
I remember the day you leave school. It was the next day or the next week was going to be the summer holidays.
Yeah.
Right. So you do your exams, and then the last day you'd walk out of school and you go, shit, that's it. And then you get the and some people it hits many years later, but I had the realization because my mum drummed it into me was that you're in the real world now, and you're not gonna work. I don't care what it is, but you're gonna work, and I don't care what you think you want to do, you're gonna work, and at that time I didn't have a clue. I'd never interviewed. You know, in school they taught you had pretend mock interviews and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
But to actually kind of go out in the world and, you know, look in the local paper. I doubt if it was there was no internet there.
Yeah.
So I wasn't looking online. I was looking in the local paper. And I remember my mum used to go to a salon to get her hair done in Kensington Church Street, West London, and just up the road from where our offices are now. And I went to meet her one day, and she introduced me to the guy that owned the salon and said, "My son's looking for a job." I wasn't looking for a job. She just my son's looking for a job. He goes, "Oh, you can start here and you can be a junior." And I was like, "Do you pay?" And again, I'd never been paid, and the pay was like £147 a month.
Okay.
Right.
Was that big balling back then?
That was YTS wages. It was rubbish.
Oh, okay.
It was YTS wages, right?
I thought that might have been you been out here doing your thing.
No, but it was good. It was money in my own pocket.
How old was you at this
I was
point?
16.
16.
I was 16. And I remember the phone was ringing. The salon phone was ringing. And I went to answer it. And the guy that owned the salon went, "Don't touch the phone. You don't answer the phone." And I went, what do you mean? He said, "You don't answer the phone. That's not your job." And I was like, but why? So because you can't speak properly. Right?
Oh wow!
And
what was he implying by that?
He was implying what he was implying was that I was still fresh from on road.
Okay.
I was still
talking black.
I was talking road.
Okay.
Right. Back then it was talking black.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't call it talking black now. Just it's. But at that point in the late 80s, it was talking black, and it was, and I had no telephone manner, and I wasn't allowed to greet the clients at the door. I wasn't allowed to take their coat, greet them, and I wasn't allowed to talk to them. And
so this was a very much know your role and know your place type vibe.
Yeah, it kind of was. But what I did, that's what I thought it was in the very first instance. But what it was just etiquette.
Okay.
So it was work floor etiquette, right? And it's the same conversations that I have with young people when they come and do internships on my floor, right? You know, if you're going to come and talk to me in my office, talk properly, right? Use your words, you know, use your vocabulary, use your adjectives, and so my only mission was it wasn't to learn how to cut hair. My mission was to answer the phone.
The reality is, in a business environment, when you're in a working environment, you can't do that. You have to.
Not if you're taking yourself seriously.
Seriously, exactly.
If you're taking,
or if you want somebody to take you seriously,
and that's the thing. It's about taking yourself seriously.
In between that time, you've somehow transitioned into meeting people in the music industry. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like, how did you go from literally being in the hairdressers to maybe meeting somebody, or, you know, being around people that worked in the music industry?
I had a natural inclination for networking, and I was inquisitive, and people that came into the salon, as I went along, I learned how to communicate. I learned how to talk. I learned how to start conversations, and in doing that, everybody that I met people. I met actors, actresses, politicians.
Okay.
And one day, Lincoln Elias walked in, and we got talking, and I asked him what he did, and he said he was an A&R man. And I had no idea what an A&R man was at that time. I was literally, I just thought that records got made, right? And you went and bought that. You know, I had a piece of vinyl in my hand. I had no idea of the process that went to getting this piece of vinyl.
You're just
in
thinking
my
they're just in the studio, then the next day it just comes
they
out.
press a button,
Yeah,
and that's it. And he told me that he found and discovered artists, and at that time, he had found that, an artist who was massive at the time called Terence Trent D'Arby, and this is a black guy, by the way. And this was back in the back end of the 80s, so this is about 86, 87. So to meet a black man in the music industry then, that was an A&R man being super successful.
Okay.
But that just gave me an insight into, there's stuff behind, you know, the curtain, the what's behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, wow. And my eyes just was out on stalks.
So he started taking you around?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just networking, and then from meeting these guys, I was in studios and at these mad parties, and I was like, I need to be doing this.
Yeah.
But you're still at the hair salon.
I'm still at the hair salon.
Are you picking up the phone yet?
Yeah, I picked up the phone.
Graduate.
I picked up the phone, and what I didn't see at the time was that it was the best place for me to be, because
Yeah,
I
of
was
course.
just in a creative industry.
Yeah.
And then, and as I say to everybody, if don't ever let opportunities pass you by. So ask, be inquisitive, ask people questions, get feedback, and that led to me just being in a situation where someone was leaving their job at Island Records, and at that time they were called they weren't interns at that time. They were actually called. You were called a dog's body. You were called a T-boy.
Yeah.
And literally, I went and asked the head of promotions if I could have an interview for the job, and a week later, I had the job.
Look, you've talked to me over the years a lot about how it looked back then to work in a record label, which is very different to how it is now. Now, you know, it's pretty professional. Yeah. I say pretty professional.
Yeah.
Like, it's still fun.
Yeah.
It's still vibes.
I wouldn't say stressful. It was, it was fun to be around. And it was fun to be around, one, because I worked at the right label, but the music industry was just in rude health. You know, everyone was selling millions of records. Yeah. And I worked at a label that, when I first started, was an independent. So the like-minded people there were, it was one of the best places to be. I hadn't worked in corporate in the corporate major label world until Island got bought by Polygram.
Okay.
And that was a difficult time, because Island had to stop being independent and be part of a major setup, and it was hard to kind of find the middle ground between Island still keeping its DNA and what was special about it to understanding that it was part of a major. But up until that point, it was absolute carnage.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me what was the difference? Like, what was the actual difference between it being independent and then it being a part of a major?
Well, Island in the end got too big to be an independent, and it was.
Imagine that.
Yeah, no, I know, right? And but we still wasn't in the major label headspace or wanting to be.
I guess here's the thing, you know, when you're working in the creative industry, you know, a lot of, even now, when you're coming into it, a lot of those jobs are not paid well, if at all. But the benefits are, yeah, you might have had a day making tea or whatever, but you get to go and see a show, you get to go and, you know, you get to hang out with cool people. Like, it is a vibe. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, you know, what is it that inspired you and kept you going? And I say, like, what made you ambitious?
Right.
And lastly, you know, like, what were you getting paid as well? Like,
my first salary was $6,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I had, I think I was on a trial, and after the trial it went up to $8,000 a year.
Okay.
And I remember getting the job, feeling having a bit of a big ego, because I knew the people that were the heads of A&R, and that I knew people, And I started getting ideas above my stations, and I started to become mouthy, and I started to believe that I was way ahead of where I should be, and my mouth was big. And I remember I wanted to sign something, and Julian wouldn't let me, and I kicked off about it, and I kicked off so loudly that the MD at the time had heard me kicking off. And he came downstairs and he said, "What's going on? What's the problem?" And I said, "Fucking Julian, he won't let me sign this fucking act. And if he doesn't back me, I'll leave."
Okay.
And the MD looked at me and he opened the door. He said, "We'll leave." and I remember I literally found myself on the corner of the street at the top of the road from the office, like going,
I've got a funny
I've
vision
just
of
walked
this.
myself out a job.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like August and it was sunny.
I was gonna say, was it raining?
You know, it was sunny. It was
Okay.
sunny, and I remember standing at the top of the road going, "What the fuck have I just done?" And that was ego, and it was ego and pride that walked me out of that building.
How did you repair that? Because obviously you left.
Yeah, no, I left, and I literally, and I hadn't spent enough time in the music industry to kind of to have got my feet under the table, so I could have easily kind of, lost my way and been sweeping the streets or, but luckily again through networking and contacts, I managed to get a job at another small independent called Big Life Records.
Okay.
That was run by a great man called Jazz Summers. But they had a management company and a record company, and they were putting out records like De La Soul over here and Naughty by Nature,
Okay.
as well as managing Lisa Stansfield,
Okay.
who was a massive soul singer at the time. But I was lucky that I managed to get a job a couple of weeks later. I was so lucky.
So you was out of the record label, went somewhere else,
Yeah.
and then eventually came back.
Yeah, and I remember the phone ringing, and it was Julian Palmer. And he called me. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing. No, it's cool. I'm just here, just chilling. You know what I mean? Everything's cool."
Trying to act like you're having fun.
Totally acting like nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you want to come back to Ireland?" I was like, "Hell yes!"
How was it for you? Underneath Julian, and like what were the kind of things that you used to get into with him? Because I'll tell you why I asked that. Because I remember very specifically asking you about mixing.
Yeah.
How do you mix a record? How do you know when it's a good mix? It's things that I've never thought of. You just buy a record, you hear it, you enjoy the record. That's it. Now you're in a record company, you're taking something that's rough. It's a demo or whatever, or it's been produced up, but trying to get an understanding of like just stuff that is very specific like that. And
if you have a good understanding of the history of music and you have listened to great voices and you've been brought up listening to great albums and the way that people talk about these artists and the effect that these artists have on the culture or on the landscape or the political landscape or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's that, having that, just that natural kind of innate and love and curiosity of music.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's about spending time, and it's about asking questions and never being frightened to ask questions. And one thing that I did coming through was I just lived in the studio because that's where music was made, and you had to understand what that process was, and you had to understand what the difference between the producer and the engineer was in the room.
Yeah.
Right. And you had to understand about the miking up of a kit, the miking up of a room,
Yeah.
and making loads of rubbish shit records, right? And the mixes sounding fucking rubbish.
This is not really a job for the indecisive, is it?
You are always indecisive, but you just got to have the bottle to make that decision.
Okay.
The indecisiveness, it still lives with me now. The insecurities of indecisiveness.
Does it not? Is it a hit? Is it not?
Absolutely. But experience pulls you back to a point of, I got this.
You can get to a point where you know what you like and you know that works and it's good and the mix is there, but like, someone might have a different preference. They might like the vocal more up front.
Exactly.
They might like the bass louder.
Exactly.
They might want the kick punching through or whatever, but I think you get to a point where that's of a standard, and you can reference that against some of your best records that back to front.
Absolutely.
But just, this is your vibe.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. explain to me the conversation of how you then ended up becoming an A&R yourself.
That's the question of when the Padawan becomes a Jedi,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know, when you become
When you become a man.
Yeah, listen, I've told this story before. It took me 6 years to have a hit. It took Ben 18 months.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And that, you know, and having a hit that quickly, you're gonna have to start winging it. Because people go, well, you know what you're doing then.
Yeah.
Right? You know what you're doing. You just had a hit, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's a serious pressure.
Of course.
Right? Because then you've got to go and repeat.
Yeah.
Right? And repeating is another hard thing to do. And because Ben had success quite quickly, he then had a period of barrenness.
Yeah.
Because it was just like, whoa, okay, boy, it's not that easy. And I need to recalibrate. You know, and I had 6 years and luckily enough, I worked in a place where people liked me and wanted to give me time. Giving someone, you know, 6 years without having a hit.
Yeah.
You know, but when I did have the hit, I knew exactly how it all came together because I had so many other failures before that and near misses.
Yeah.
So when I finally had Sugar Babes, which was my first #1 hit, I was like, okay. And then the next one was a #1 hit. And the next one was a #1 hit, and the album was a #1 hit, and the next album after that was a #1 hit.
Okay.
And
so that's got to be a confidence building thing itself as well, right?
It goes back to the question of at what point do you say that you're an A&R person?
Okay.
Right, and you know, for me, it's just the experience of years under your belt that you can call yourself an A&R person.
You know what? One of the things that people never talk about when it comes to like what is an A&R or what's the role of the job, for me, and this is like a recent revelation that I've just been thinking about. It's just like, just make an album and just deliver it to the label. Yeah. Now, whatever might happen with that after, whether it goes on to work or it doesn't work, right? Just completing that process of discovering an artist, helping them create a record, and delivering the album. Like, here it is. Here's the master. Like, it's done. I've been through the process. Like, that's no easy thing. Like, trust me. That is no easy thing in itself. And so many people don't finish a lot of records, you know, like they don't finish a lot of albums, you know.
But that's the learning curve. What Ben is saying there is absolutely the learning curve. It's not whether something's been successful. It's that, do you know what the process is?
Yeah.
Can you take the process from start to finish, right? And if you can do that, and you've done it quite a few times, then you're slowly getting nearer and nearer. I nearly had a hit to the point where you go, bang, you have a massive hit.
Actually, after that point, you then discovered somebody who went on to be, without question, one of the most iconic artists that this country's ever produced, in Amy Winehouse. Let's talk about that. Yeah, how did you find Amy?
Yeah. I was like, I want something that sells at Wembley Arena. I want something that the Americans kind of go, damn. So, you know, again, I didn't make this stuff up. It didn't happen by accident. It was a thought process in my head of what I needed to be doing. And a couple of years later, they manifest themselves. So, you know, that thing about saying that you're going to go and try and achieve things, say it.
Okay.
Say it and go
the thoughts becoming things.
So you go do it because, you know, I that was the thought process for me. Find something that can cross over and find a voice that can sell a lot of records.
Can you remember when you very first heard her sing?
It was a manager. He came to play me his producer writers, the Lewinson brothers, and they had obviously been called in by the management at the time to do some demos with her, and he had other artists to play me, but he was just playing me what the producers were doing, what his producers were doing, and there was a show reel. It was a show reel of all their different works with different kind of artists, and he was playing me all the different artists, and then this song came on, and it was called Procrastination. And it was Amy's vocal, and I was like, "Who's that?" And I remember just going, "Who's that?" And he wouldn't tell me because 19 management at the time who were managing Amy was just kind of keeping it under wraps and weren't really engaging records. She had signed a publishing deal with Guy Moot, and the development actually started via her publisher.
Okay,
they had hooked her up with Salam Remy. because Salam was signed to the same publishing company. So as much as
if you don't know Salam Remy,
Salam Remy is an
Nas,
absolute
the
tune.
Fugees, obviously Amy, and
He actually even produced. I found out the other day. Here Comes the Hot Stepper. I didn't even know he produced that.
And but that the first time I heard her voice, I knew that was going back to that thing about I need to find a voice.
Yeah,
that was the voice.
How did you make it happen?
I remember calling Nick Szymanski, who was the manager, who later worked at Island Records. But I remember calling him every day for weeks, right? And he would not return any of my calls. And so I went down to 19 Management, which was in Battersea at the time. I made a meeting with another manager inside the offices. I then got into while I was halfway through the meeting, I said, "Where does Nick Szymanski sit?" and he said, "Just round the corner." So I left that meeting, walked round the corridor door, and I remember opening the door of Nick Szymanski's office, and sitting on the floor was Amy. And I didn't know, I'd never met Amy at the time, but there was this young girl that was surrounded by bits of paper. And she had that were photocopies of the tattoos that she had on her forearm.
Okay.
And they were figuring out artwork for the CD that they were going to send out, because they didn't want an image of her face. They just wanted to kind of keep it low key. And I remember her turning around and looking up at me, and I'm like, "You're Amy," because I just knew it had to be.
Yeah.
And I was like, "You're Amy?" She went, "Yeah." And I went, "I'm Darcus." And she went, and I went, and then I saw Nick. I went, "All right, Nick, it's Darcus. I've been trying to get hold of you." And Amy, and he was like, "Oh, right." And he was a bit shocked that I was in the room. And Amy was just a bit matter of fact. I mean, she didn't care who I was.
Yeah.
The fact that I was from a record company, she didn't even bat an eyelid. That wasn't her game. Her game was just music. And that was, and then I met her, and then the attitude was just like filled the room. And I was just like, this girl, we've got to sign her.
The Back to Black era, I mean, it's iconic period, and I'm sure absolutely changed your life and changed a lot of people's lives, to be honest with you. And it's kind of affected British music history, really, when you check it.
A lot of people need to understand that Amy wrote a lot of those songs when she was 14, 15 and 16. And that's why I thought she was incredible, because some of those songs she was writing at that age, and I was just like, I know what I was doing at 14, 15 and 16. And it wasn't writing lyrics like that, right? So I knew she had to be, I knew she was special, but it was, she had to then go and live life again, another lifetime to write what she was going to write in Back to Black. And she found other things to do with her time. And that was to find the love of her life. She found drink, and eventually drugs found her. And it was just many things we're trying to do to keep her engaged, and trying to just keep her going to the studio rather than getting lost down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And that was proven really hard. And I remember it got to about 3 years, and people were really asking, "Is a record going to come?" And Guy Moot had just signed Mark Ronson. He said, "Look, I've just signed Mark Ronson. Why doesn't Amy spend some time with Mark?" And they did, and they got on really like a house on fire. And they spent a couple of weeks together just playing records.
Did they were they recording in the UK or the US?
She would just go and visit Mark. She went and spent some time out with Mark in New York. Didn't record anything, just listen to records.
Oh, okay.
Just listen to kind of girl groups, the Phil Spector productions, and talked and just got on. And then I remember she was helping him out on a gig, because he was just starting his first album with Valerie and
Version, right?
Yeah, the Version album. And she did a live show for him. And I remember going down to the live show and seeing Amy for the first time in a long time. And she was very skinny.
Okay.
And she was rocking the Beehive. And she had these tats. And I was just like, oh shit. Okay, so the look is strong, but she's drinking a lot. And at that point I didn't know it was the drugs, but I remember even though she was looking thin and she was drinking, I remember she called me and my then boss Nick Gatfield and said, "I want to come in and play you some songs. I think I'm ready." And she came in with acoustic with Ray, her manager, and sat down in front of me and Nick and tuned up the acoustic guitar, and the first song she played was "Love Is a Losing Game."
Wow.
And when you kind of when I look back and at that moment, you just, it's, when you tell people the story, they kind of go, wow.
Yeah.
And when I tell it, I kind of go, wow.
Yeah.
But at the time, you're just like, Amy's there. It's been a nightmare for the past 3 years. She's just come in and she's played this song that you know's good, but you don't know how special it's gonna be.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I know it's good just because it's good.
Yeah. You don't always have the foresight to know.
You don't have the
that it's
foresight.
gonna-
Other people tell you it's great.
Okay.
I never walk around. We never walk around going, "What we're doing is great and it's amazing." Other people give it that validity.
Yeah.
And I remember that was what happened with Amy. Other people started hearing the music and going, "This is really special,"
How did it change life for you? You've gone from thinking, shit, it's not on the Radio 1 playlist. What's happening with my job?
Yeah.
To now what's happening?
It was a bit surreal, and because I wasn't senior, I wasn't a director, I wasn't a senior executive. I was an A&R manager, so I felt that I was holding on for dear life, and maybe other people were getting shine.
So so maybe you're feeling like the more senior ones are gonna go.
Yeah, I was kind of apologetic at the time because it was so huge, and somehow I didn't feel the right or experienced enough to kind of, I signed this.
Really?
And yeah, it was a bit of a surreal. It's a bit of a surreal time, and I didn't have an ego big enough to kind of go, I own this.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Because I tell you why. Because Nick, who was my boss at the time, helped me A&R it. Because this, it goes back to this thing about experience and making that Amy record. I had never made a record like Back to Black before, so I needed his experience, whether it's in the mix or whether it's like, have a listen to this and blah, blah, blah. So I always felt like it wasn't complete ownership.
Yeah. You didn't 100%.
No,
That's
because, when I signed, I had to bring Nick in to help do the deal, right? So I didn't sign her. I pulled her in and, I didn't do the name on the I didn't sign my name on the contract. Nick Gatfield signed his name on the contract, who was my boss.
Yeah.
So as much as I scouted her, brought her in, that definition of putting a name on the contract, that wasn't me.
Yeah, but obviously you're maybe a bit older now and you've experienced a lot more now.
Yeah.
And you might have a different opinion on it, but at the same time, it's like, maybe you didn't do all of that stuff, but you still did the most important part of bringing her in.
I think again, it kind of goes back to other people. Other people will see how history went down, and it will never be out of my mouth. It'll be out of other people's mouths because people always, when people talk about success has many fathers.
Yeah.
Right? And I never want to be that person piping up.
Yeah.
Because you either know or you don't know. I don't need to pipe up for me to feel cool about my position.
So how did it, the album's out and,
It's popping. You're popping.
You're the A&R manager, but what's happening now? There's promotions, there's a change at the label. There was a big swell and a big change around that 2 or 3 years after that, for you. And
I think what Amy did for me was kind of give me a global platform. It made it. I understood now what it was to kind of have a global artist, and Brits and Grammys and millions of records, and I had paid my dues from signing acts that didn't even make the starting gate, to I remember a young girl that I signed, Hinda Hicks. That was my first, I call it, she wasn't my hit record, but I call it my first top 20.
I got vinyls of Hinda Hicks.
Have you? I've still got my vinyls of Hinda Hicks. Yeah. And some people go, right, you signed Hinda Hicks? She was wicked.
Yeah.
And I've gone through the nearlies and I've gone through the nowhere nears, and I've had some amazing moments. So I've had the experience from back to front and front to back of the whole process. So when contracts are up and people want to make sure that you're not going, then people will offer you a directorship. And I didn't ask for a directorship.
Yeah, because I was actually going to ask you, did you, with all of the success that you had, did you then take it upon yourself to now start thinking, all right, let me try and negotiate my contract? Or was you just kind of, just chilling?
I was always happy to have a job.
Yeah.
I was always happy all I wanted to do was do great things and be successful. And I knew if I was successful, then I'll still have a job. And if I would have a job, I could still pay my mortgage. And if I could still pay my mortgage, it meant that my children wouldn't be homeless.
Yeah, they would
and I'd have to be looking for
head.
rented accommodation. So it was never about how can I be a director? How can I run the company? How can I do this? How can I do that? It was about how do I not get fired?
Yeah.
How do I keep in a job that I'm not looking for accommodation?
Yeah, and so that your family's safe.
So my family's safe. That was once you have a child and you have a mortgage. That's there's. I wasn't caring about. I need to be promoted. I just need to keep my job and I need to keep the money coming in.
Imagine, so we're going literally now. We started at T-Boy here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? From you working at different places, coming back and then becoming an A&R, doing Sugar Babes, doing a few other acts, being Cold, having Amy Winehouse, having huge success. Obviously, you're building your way up up around the company. Are you now starting to feel like maybe, I could run this company? I could.
Never.
Let me tell you what happened. He becomes head of A&R. He's had all the success. Do you know what they did?
What?
They gave him a new PA. You know who that PA was?
Yes, that was my upside of being successful. I got Ben as a PA.
Now, I didn't last very long as his PA. And I got some heated phone calls at all hours of the day and night because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing.
Serious?
And we can laugh about this now.
No, yeah.
It was dreaded.
But,
it was funny.
Was you getting them early morning calls?
When I think about it, I used to come at Ben hardcore.
Nah,
Is
listen,
it?
Yeah.
I was
Focus.
like, I need to be focused because like he smokes. If I smoke,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
chaos.
Yeah.
It's chaos. So
yeah.
it was a learning curve and a half for me, let me tell you.
But then you oversaw, some success that Ben had with Tinty Strider. How was that for you?
When I took over as president, and it was then crystal clear to me that I had all these A&R people that I had to look after, and me being an A&R person or me signing was less important than it was about bringing other people through. And I think Ben was probably the first person that I kind of was my first process of working with another A&R person, and it worked. You know what I mean? And it was almost, it just was work. Everything we did it just kind of worked.
We had Take Me Back with, and it's funny because Take Me Back actually had Bluey Robinson on the hook originally. and that was it. And the rest of it is really, it's really history. I mean,
and when you kind of go back, Tinchy, what Ben did with Tinchy, that was like one of the first at the time. Chipmunk then followed.
Yeah.
Everybody
that
followed.
Was massive. That was massive for the scene. That moment there was huge for the scene in
Yeah.
that sense, because that was like the first wave of like artists coming through
And crossing over.
Yeah, and crossing over.
Yeah.
When you had that opportunity to do that, this is when you, Darcus, became president of the record label. What was that conversation like? When did that start to? When did you start moving into that? Like,
Again,
what happened?
what you got to understand is that I never wanted to be president. And at that time, maybe a year before or 2 years before, people were saying to me, "When are they going to let you run the label?" And I was like, and I used to look at people going, "Are you mad?" As if they would let me, a black man, run a label, like run a frontline label. And I never got it. I never understood it. And then one day, I was in a meeting. Do you want me to tell you how it went down?
Please.
So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy in my role. I'm the hottest A&R man out there. I'm just rolling.
There's a bounce in your step
There's a bounce in my step.
You're running the department.
Chest is
running
high,
department.
strong.
I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not going to fire me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm paid and my royalty checks are coming. It's all like, I've got no responsibility except to myself and my artists. The person that became my co-president, Ted, who was head of marketing at the time, he calls me and he said, "Yo, where are you at?" And I said, "I'm out having lunch." He said, "You need to come back to the office." And I was like, "Oh, man, all right." I said, "Why? What's happening?" He goes, "You need to come back to the office." So I go back to the office and I'm on my floor and I'm looking for Ted and Ted's not there. So I'm like, "Where's Ted?" And there's like, he's downstairs in David Joseph's office, who's the now chairman of Universal. And so I go downstairs and I open the door and I see Ted sitting in the room. I go, "Ted, what's going on?" And he said, "Nick Catfield's been fired. Nick Catfield's gone." I went, "What?" Nick Gatfield's gone. That was our
Who's
boss. I was like, rah. I said, so what's going to happen? He said, I don't know, man. I don't know. But just sit down because David Joseph's coming. He's going to come and tell us. So I'm sitting there going, they're going to come in and tell us that so-and-so's coming in to take over. And if that happens, I might get vexed because I might not like the person. So I'm thinking, right, they're just going to bring someone in and will I like the person and blah, blah, blah. And David Joseph, who was the incoming chairman, comes into the office and he gives me and Ted a piece of paper and it's a press release. And I look at it and it says, with immediate effect, Darcus Beese and Ted Cockle are now co-presidents of Island Records.
Wow.
And I sit there and the blood drains from my face and I just look at David and I go, can't I just be an MD? I don't want to be president.
Why?
Because it just see the magnitude of being called president.
Yeah.
You got. I was working at an office where I was working with everybody that were my peers.
Yeah.
You know, that I'd come up with a lot of them. You know what I mean? I was a head of department, but I wasn't everybody's boss. And in one movement, I'm now everybody's boss.
A humongous achievement. When you look at the music just in general over the years that record label have put out and the moments that it's had, to be named co-president is like beyond belief.
Yeah. Again, it's what other people, it's the gravity of what other people give it. See, and then it was, you're running Island Records, don't break it. Right? Don't mash up the heritage, the legacy of what it was. And that was always the mission.
Radar Radio.